Alright everyone, welcome back again to more Umineko. And as promised by the witch herself, the drama hits hard already. We barely got into like the start of episode 2 and already we have some issues with Shannon and the promise she made to her. I want to find out what that is too, so hopefully we get to see a little bit more of that in this episode, but we'll find out. So I want to thank you all for the love and support, and we're going to continue on from there. So if anything else, let's get started. Alright guys, welcome back. But relatives would occasionally visit at other times as well. Of course, they didn't come just to drink tea. On this day, Ava's family had visited the head family in Rokenshima. The 3 people from Kraus's family and the 3 people from Ava's family had gathered in the parlor, and were having a friendly chat as they updated everyone on their situations. Genji had supposedly told Kinzo of Ava's family's arrival, but he hadn't come down yet. He was probably immersed in his own research and couldn't spare the time. This often happened, so the others waited patiently for their fickle father to come down.
ほう、それは頼もしいじゃないか。お父さんのところでたくさん勉強して、早く手助けができるよう頑張りたまえ。
ありがとうございます。今は父の紹介で、たくさんの人生の先輩方に、本当に貴重な勉強をさせていただいています。そのいずれも、学校では学べないことばかりです。
学校で習うのは国語算数やない。ものを学ぶ姿勢と態度を学ぶんや。その基礎ができて、ようやく生涯をかけた勉強が始まるんやで。ここをな、勘違いしとる奴は、生涯学べん石頭や。国語算数で満点取れても、会社じゃ役に立たへん。
全くその通りだよ。秀吉さんの教育方針はいつも本当にご立派ですな。
ジョージもまだまだ半人前や。それを常に忘れんで、勉強に励むんやで。
よしなさいよ、あなた。ジョージはいっつも一生懸命頑張ってるわよ。ねえ。
本当に立派ね。うちのジェシカにも爪の赤を分けてもらいたいわ。
まだテストの結果を根に持ってるのかよ。受験勉強は私なりにやってるって。こんな席でまで言うことはねえだろうよ。うせえぜ。
When George was praised for his diligence, the conversation would nearly always turn to Jessica, who hated studying. Jessica made an openly displeased face as though she'd known it would come back to her.
やれやれ。ジェシカは勉強と一緒に、少しはおしとやかな言葉遣いも学ぶ必要があるんじゃないかね。後宮家の家紋を背負う一人娘が、それではみっともないな。
あら、これはこれで魅力的よねえ。時代は変わるのよ。男に食わしてもらうために定宿を装わなくてはならなかった時代は、とっくに終わってるんだから。
そうそう。やっぱエヴァおばさんはわかってますね。
今日は頭痛が特にこたえます。
大丈夫ですか？夏日おばさん、顔色が優れないみたいです。
ありがとう。大丈夫です。でも本当に、月日が経つのは早いものね。半ズボン姿で浜辺を駆け巡って、ずぶ濡れになって帰ってきた日が、ついこの間のように思います。
それはジェシカちゃんも同じよね。今じゃ、お化粧の仕方にだってこだわるレディーなんだから。眉にこだわりがあるのね。今日のあなた、とってもキュートよ。
ありがとうございます。誰も気づいてくれなかったんで、自信なくしてたとこです。
A full smile rose to Jessica's face as the result of her own studies were finally noticed. Ava smiled back just as widely. Then she turned that smile towards Natsuhi.
ダメよ、夏日姉さん。自分のこの小さな変化にも気づかなくちゃ。かわいそうなジェシカちゃん。 一番最初にお母さんに気づいてもらいたかったでしょうに。ねえ。
It's good to know that Ava still doesn't take a moment to take pot shots at Natsuhi over here.
いいんです、いいんです。あの人、そういうの全然気づかない人なんで。
ジェシカ、母親をあの人呼ばわりとは感心できんね。謝りなさい。
言葉遣いについては、後でよく言って聞かせます。
ちぇ、お子様は邪魔だってんならそう言ってくれよ。私は席を外させてもらうぜ。ここは空気がよどんでるぜ。
ジェシカ。
Jessica was still at the unpredictable age with exams right around the corner. Recently, she had clashed often with her mother, who was enthusiastic about her education.
失礼いたします。
Jessica, making to leave the parlor in a bad mood, and Shannon, pushing a serving cart loaded with tea, bumped into each other.
ああ、シャノン。私の分のお茶はいらないぜ。私は庭でもほっつき歩いてくる。
お嬢様？
シャノン、お茶が冷めます。配膳を急ぎなさい。
失礼しました。
She just got there. How's the tea getting cold? Shannon hadn't actually done anything wrong, but Natsuhi, who felt like some shame to herself had been shown, lashed out at her emotionally. Ah, okay, see, that makes sense. This was something that often happened in the Ushiromiya family, but it seemed that Shannon wasn't strong-willed enough to accept it that way. She shrunk back and nervously prepared the black tea. She had the unfortunate habit of making more mistakes when she felt intimidated. Her pitiful appearance dispersed the peaceful atmosphere that had been there until just a moment ago. That wasn't really Shannon's fault, but she thought she might be the source and felt the pressure on her chest. Her shaking fingers made the porcelain clatter, and you couldn't have called it graceful, not even as an empty compliment. The more pitiful everyone thought that was, the greater the sounds grew. More irritated Natsuhi looked, and the more Shannon cowered. Shannon's thin neck felt like it was being choked and suffocated by the death god called tension. Then, George spoke cheerfully, as if to blow away the stiff atmosphere.
これは、いい香りだね。
I like how coincidentally the music Hope popped in.
何の紅茶かな？
これは。
言わないで。当てるから。これは特徴的な匂いだから、多分わかるよ。アールグレイ、かな？
多分、そうだと思います。
多分、アールグレイで合ってるよ。台所に戻ったら、紅茶の缶を見てごらん。
ほう。ジョージ君は紅茶に詳しいのかね？
お世話になっている社長さんに紅茶の詳しい人がいまして、講釈を聞いているうちに少しだけわかるようになりました。
ああ、おこのぎ食品の社長さんかい。あの人、そういううんちくは得意やな。
紅茶の名前って産地を示すことが多いんでしょ？じゃあこれはアールグレイという土地で栽培されたのが由来なのかしらね。
昔、イギリスにグレイ伯爵という人がいたそうで、その人にちなんでつけた名前だそうだよ。ちなみに、この特徴的な匂いは茶葉のものではなくて、ベルガモットというみかんの親戚にあたる果物でつけたものなんだって。
そうなの。初めて知りました。そういう知識を持っていると、紅茶もより美味しくいただけますね。
酒もタバコも同じや。嗜好品はロマンをたしなむもんやで。こういううんちくが味わいを深めるんや。
薬の能書きと同じよね。夏日姉さんも愛用してる頭痛薬の説明書、今度はじっくり読んでから飲んでみなさいよ。
それはいい。今夜試してみなさい。
ええ、試してみます。
シャノンちゃん、そのポットを開けてごらん。茶葉の中にベルガモットを乾燥させたものが混じっているのを見つけられるはずだよ。
はい。入っています。オレンジの皮を乾燥させたようなものが混じっています。
うん。多分これがベルガモットだね。アールグレイの香りの主成分だよ。匂いは鮮烈だから味がきつそうな印象があるけど、素直で飲みやすい味なんだよ。ミルクティーにすると香りもまろやかになって素敵かもしれないね。みんなに注いでポットに余った分があったら、ぜひミルクティーにして飲んでみるといいよ。
はい。ありがとうございます。
I am very surprised that no one is noticing that small little thing between them. Like, you would think the mom, Ava, would be able to pinpoint that, but she hasn't, because she notices only at the last minute when she sees her son crying over her body, over Shannon's body in the first episode. George gave her a small wink. Shannon finally realized that George had been doing her a favor by calming down the atmosphere in the room. And he had been doing it for her sake as she had lost her self-confidence. The Ushinomiya family did not pamper their servants, so if there was any awkwardness, they would be harshly punished. So it didn't often happen that they were given a helping hand like this. Thanks to George's concern, Shannon was somehow able to get a hold of herself and finish serving everything safely. If she was calm when she worked, she could easily carry out her tasks elegantly and flawlessly. By the time the black tea was laid out on the table and the elegant scent drifted around, the room was completely back to how it had been, in a peaceful mood as everyone praised George's knowledge. Shannon wanted to thank him for saving her, but it didn't look like she would get the chance. So she at least thanked him inside her heart, praying to God that George would hear it and push that serving cart away.
George 兄さんは昔からそういう時には助け舟を出してくれるんだよ。話題をさらりと変えてくれるというかさ。
Shannon and Jessica could be seen in the rose garden. Jessica, having gotten into a fight with her mother, now felt unable to simply nonchalantly wander back into the parlor, and so found herself here, killing time.
思い返せば、こういう助けられ方をしたのは、今回が初めてじゃない気がします。
Whenever I made a careless mistake and George-sama was there, he would always naturally smooth things over and make things harmonious, I think. Maybe it wasn't something as direct as picking up a fork that had been dropped, but that was his way of caring. Even servants have pride. They want to fix their own mistakes by themselves, because if a guest helped them out with that, they would lose face.
そういう空気を読むのが得意なんだろうぜ。ま、ジョージ兄さんの美学なんだろうよ。あの人、妙に気ざったらしいところあるからな。
そんなことありません。とっても素敵な方だと思います。
ひょっとしてシャノン、ジョージ兄さんに惚れた？
Shannon had repeated Jessica's words uncharacteristically forcefully, so Jessica caught on immediately.
いえ、そういうことはないかと。
そういや、ジョージ兄さんってあまり浮いた話を聞いたことないし。あれ？確か、家庭的な子がタイプだとか前に聞いたかな。そりゃいいぜ！シャノンぴったりじゃん！
私がですか？
I like how she reacted to that. She's like, oh, really?
そんな、私にはそんな資格ありませんし。
資格はあるぜ。何年も昔から顔を合わせてて、半ば幼馴染状態。互いに男女であることを意識しないナチュラルな関係ってのは、一度意識し始めるとトントン拍子らしいぜ。
Jessica loved teen magazines with these kinds of stories, and she always on the phone talking excitedly with her friends about that kind of thing. So she had a keen intuition for this kind of romantic topic. So this wasn't the first time a topic like this had been brought to Shannon. But it was certainly the first time she had noticed George as a member of the opposite sex. She was furniture, and George was an honored guest connected to the Ushinomiya family. So she had thought it impermissible to even imagine any deeper relationship. So she hadn't thought about it. Jessica was taking immense pleasure in poking fun at all this since it didn't affect her. Shannon was doing her best to make sure that her blushing cheeks weren't discovered. So if George showed up at a time like that, there would be no way she would be able to keep her cool. They saw George come out from the entrance hall of the mansion. It looked like he had seen them as well. He headed over, waving his hand. Shannon had to frantically try to regain her ordinary composure before George reached them.
おじい様がやっと降りてきたよ。あとは大人たちの話になるからって追い出されてね。
そりゃ抜け出して正解だよ。じい様の顔を拝むくらいなら、疫病神にキスした方がマシだぜ。
そんな言い方は悪いよ。ただ、おじい様は僕らのことを疫病神だと思っているかもしれないね。何しろ、事業用にお金を借りたいという話でやってきたんだから。
That's right, this wasn't the customary annual October family conference. Ava's family had visited to apply for a business loan from the main family. Kinzo had vast resources and he lent those out to his children. Of course, this was not money to lend because they had gotten themselves into financial trouble. How would they expand their business using the vast amount of money that they borrowed? How much interest would be attached and how soon could it be repaid? This wasn't a loan for the have-nots. It was a loan for those who were on the offense. Kinzo judged strictly whether it was worth lending out his fortune, and afterwards he strictly oversaw its use. So there was occasionally this spectacle where relatives visited Rokenjima and explained their business to Kinzo. To the parents, it may well have been a meeting concerning the movement of large sums of money forcing immense stress upon them. But to Jessica, who lived on this isolated island called Rokenjima, it was a precious opportunity to meet up with her cousins. So even her bad mood from getting into the fight with her mother was immediately cured by this chat with the infrequent visitor George.
うちも全くケチくせえぜ。金なんて余ってるんだろうから、気前よく貸してやりゃいいのによ。うちの親父もじい様も、どうせねちっこくもったいぶってんだろうぜ。
お金を貸すとき、慎重になるのは当然のことだよ。もちろんうちの父さんも、借り入れた分で事業を拡大し、しっかり返却できるプランを持って訪れてる。あとは、プレゼンテーション次第ってところだろうね。本当は、脇で見させてもらって勉強したいんだけど、母さんに追い出されちゃったんだよ。ちょっと残念かな。
親方様は、クラウス様やエヴァ様のことを、今でも子供の頃と全く変わらないように叱られるようです。そんな姿を、息子のジョージ様に、きっと見せたくないのでしょう。
As Shannon hung her head, she thought back on those scenes she had grown used to seeing while working in the mansion. Even Kraus, who acted haughtily towards his siblings, was still treated like a child by Kinzo. Shannon herself had often seen Kinzo slapping Kraus or making him sit in Seiza style. It was probably deeply humiliating to have that forced upon him at his age. In the Ushiromiya family, taking care not to be present when this happened was one of the great tasks of the servants. But of course, that did mean that Shannon had been making mistakes by being witness to it.
そうだろうね。それを察して姿を消すのも、子供の務め、かな。それにしても、今年もこの庭園の花は、本当に素敵だね。
George stretched as he said that, and truly effortlessly he changed the subject away from something that had become a little gloomy. This time, Shannon noticed it too. This person, George, was highly sensitive to the mood of a group, and was always caring enough to change the subject to something harmonious. It had been so smooth that Shannon hadn't noticed it until today. Today, Shannon had to really admire the behavior of George. Almost all of the boys Shannon knew of her own age were her classmates during her education. But they were all immature, and none of them had had the composure that George did. Even though he had been just another guest until moments ago, now, she couldn't describe him with just that. But that was idle thinking irrelevant to her work as a servant. Shannon tried to chase it away with a small shake of her head.
どうしたんだよ。
いえ、なんでもありません。お茶のご用意をしましょうか。先ほどのアールグレイを改めてご用意します。
紅茶の名前、覚えてくれたんだね。嬉しいよ。
Like with Shannon, apparent that she's blushing. With George, you have to look really carefully to see the blush on him too.
その、さっきはお気遣いはありがとうございました。
Shannon was finally able to put her thanks into words. If you wrote them out on paper, they wouldn't seem like much, but Shannon had needed just a little courage to say them out loud. But George played dumb.
何のことだい？お礼を言われるような覚えはないけど。
It seemed he was being a gentleman in his own way, saying that he hadn't helped her because he wanted to be thanked. It seemed that George's response had been more or less predictable to Jessica. She burst out laughing uncontrollably.
なあ、こういうところ気ざったらしいだろ？
いえ。そんなことは。
Jessica made fun of Shannon as she remained silent, red-faced. George didn't know the details, but he naturally joined in, laughing the same way. The three of them lazily walked around the garden, talking about what was new. George, as the oldest cousin, talked about his life experiences. Jessica talked about recent life in Rokenjima, and Shannon talked about her recent work. Those silly little topics went round and round in circles. Even when the other stories had been fascinating, Shannon had never felt particularly connected to their contents. She was nothing more than a servant, and she had no intention of delving into her master's lives. She simply wanted them to enjoy their time speaking with her, and was only pretending to listen intently and nodding at the right moments. But for some reason, she found talking with George deeply interesting today. Even for the things that she would normally ignore, she felt like she could feel a kindness hidden beneath the words. For some reason, she wanted to know more things about George, no matter how trivial. She stared fixedly at him. She thought that as far as looks went, this person, Ushiromiya George, was probably about average, and he didn't really stick out. But he was diligent, serious, and deeply thoughtful in a way that allowed him to understand people's hearts and care for them. But she had never been aware of these things until now. She might not have met him many times, but she had known his face for many years. Even so, she had not noticed once until now. So Shannon felt ashamed of this, and her cheeks went red. Maybe George thought that Shannon was appreciating him talking about himself because he continued to relate his personal stories. But Jessica didn't miss that slight change in Shannon. So she turned the discussion around to the topic Shannon wanted to hear about most.
そういやさ、ジョージ兄さん、いい加減に彼女とかはできたわけ？
なんだい、やぶから棒に。
Man, is she keen or what? Normally, just George's reaction would have been answer enough. But for some reason, as she was now, Shannon found herself unable to understand it unless she said it clearly.
その、ジョージ様はお優しいですから、さぞや、表になるだろうと。
いや、
It's weird to hear or see George so uncomfortable. He's usually, all together, but he gets caught off guard at times too. It's so funny.
よせよ、シャノン。そういう追い詰め方は、かえって意地悪だぜ。
私は別に意地悪のつもりは。
嬉しい勘違いをありがとう。残念だけど、特定の一人の女性とはまだご縁がないよ。見ての通り、容姿も並以下だからね。女の子を楽しくさせてあげられるような気の利いた話術もないし。
そんなことないと思います。それに、男性の魅力は、容姿では測れないところで決まるんじゃないかと思います。
And this is why I like Shannon.
だからジョージ様はとても魅力的な男性じゃないかと、思います。
That took a lot for her to say too. Now I already know Jessica's gonna come at her hard. Shannon was uncharacteristically verbose. Compared to her normal self, she was being very wordy indeed. George looked fairly pleased about hearing his own charm described, but he was just a little surprised at this high praise. Jessica, sure now that her own imagination was right on, acted as though she could barely hold back her laughter.
ありがとう、シャノンちゃん。僕に魅力を感じてくれるような寛大な女性に早く巡り会いたいね。
きっと巡り会えると思います。ジ 庄司様の本当の魅力に気づいている女性は、きっといえ、大勢いらっしゃると思いますよ。
She probably wanted to say there's a girl not very far away. She avoided saying that much, drawing a final line as a servant.
そうかな。さすがに照れるね。
Maybe he had never been praised this much by a girl. George's face turned just as bright red as Shannon's. As she watched the two of them, Jessica giggled sadistically.
ジョージ兄さんもやがては素敵なパートナーと出会うだろうけどさ、今のままじゃきっと上手にパートナーをエスコートできないと思うぜ。勤勉でいらっしゃるようだけど、そっちのお勉強はからっきしみたいだしよ。
悪かったね。その勉強はこれから少しずつしていくよ。
相手もいないのにどうやって？恋愛映画でも見る？それとも秀吉おじさんに習う？
Man, she can be mean.
まるで鬼の首でも取ったみたいだな。こういう話では男は女の子にかなわないね。
Normally, when George and Jessica got together, their parents would say George is diligent and admirable, and Jessica is lazy and rude. So it was probably irresistible fun for Jessica when their roles were finally reversed. George also realized that, so this time he was content with being the one who was teased.
ジョージ兄さんさえいいならさ、シャノンでちょっと練習してみたら？
Look at this clever little girl.
シャノンを一日退屈させずにデートに連れてくんだよ。どうよ？
そんな、お嬢様。
It's an order, right? It's the only way she'll quote-unquote accept. When she heard Jessica's audacious plan, Shannon's face turned bright red and a donut of smoke rose from it with a poof.
それはとても魅力的な提案だけど、シャノンちゃんに悪いよ。彼女の貴重な休日を奪うだけじゃない。彼女が本当に思いを寄せる人と二人きりで過ごす聖域に僕が割り込んでしまうことになる。そんな無粋なことはできないね。
私も、思い人とかそういう人はいませんので、そういうお気遣いは、無用なのです。
Shannon's blood had all rushed to her head, and it looked like even she didn't know what she was babbling about. Jessica, who knew how Shannon normally was, seemed to find that really comical. She couldn't hide her cackling laugh anymore.
そうなのかい？シャノンちゃんみたいな可愛い子が独り身なんて信じられないね。
私、使用人ですから、男の方との縁なんてありませんし、
ってことは、シャノンも将来素敵な男性を射止めるために、交際の練習が必要だってことじゃないのかよ。つまり、二人とも互いの思惑は一致するわけだ。
What a wonderful matchmaker this girl is.
なるほど、こりゃいいぜ。
Jessica irresponsibly cheered the two of them on. Now George was also hanging his head red-faced.
ジョージ、さっきから呼んでるわよ。聞こえないの？
Since Ava appeared in what was already an embarrassing situation, both of them became even more flustered. Jessica was in stitches.
母さん、ごめんよ。話が込み入っちゃっててね。気づかなかった。
これはエヴァ様。大変失礼しました。
若い子たち同士で大層盛り上がってたみたいね。あなたたちもみんなお年頃だもの。そういう話題が尽きないのもよくわかるわ。
嫌ですね。エヴァおばさんだってまだまだお若いじゃないですか。秀吉おじさんとの馴れ初めを聞かせてくださいよ。
あら、そんなの言えるわけないわよ。本当にみんな若いんだから。
それで何、母さん。用があって声をかけたんじゃないの？
お父さんたちの話が終わったわ。おじいさまにあなたの話をするからいらっしゃい。
僕の話？何の話かな？
今みんなでしてたのと同じ話よ。ほら、例の話。
ああ、あの話かい。別に、おじい様に話すようなことじゃないんじゃないかな。
何の話だよ。まさか、ジョージ兄さん、誰かと結婚するの？
それはおめでとうございます。
違うよ違うよ。特定の女性はいないってさっき言ったじゃないか。
威張ることじゃないでしょ。まったく。
Ava smiled bitterly, looking a little exasperated.
わかった。ジョージ兄さん、あれでしょ。お見合いだ。
お見合いですか？
まあね。
As a man, George undoubtedly wanted to find a partner by himself and carry her off himself. So it seemed that he found the idea of meeting his partner for the first time in a marriage meeting arranged by his parents to be a little pathetic.
お見合いというのは、もっと年齢が成熟してからするものじゃないのかな。
Alright guys, I'm gonna end the video here for today. Thank you all for watching. When we come back, we're gonna continue on with this part of the story. I'm liking this. I'm liking this part of the story where it's discussing or delving into the relationship of both Shannon and George. It's like, it's just full of warm, colorful wholesomeness right now that will be destroyed in the time to come. So, right now, I'm enjoying it for what it's worth. If anything else, guys, thank you again. Until the next one.